Hello, guys. So we're going to go ahead. I am working on catching up your grades for all your nervous system stuff. Overall, you guys did really well on the test, so I was happy to see that. You'll see those grades being put in progress book relatively soon. So that's my goal, is to get those in by the end of the day. And so, with only a couple weeks left of school, I'm actually awaiting an email back from Mr. D to see how things are going to kind of work out, because we are a mixed age class, so there's juniors and seniors in this class. So normally things are different, but obviously this year is anything but normal. So we're probably going to start to lighten the workload a little bit. But before we do that, I would like to go ahead and at least introduce you into the cardiovascular system. This being said, I'm not sure if we'll have a test at the end of this. It'll depend on what is in Mr. D's email. Obviously, I won't test you just to test you. So if he says no, we won't worry so much about it, and we'll just use these ed puzzles as assignments and ways to help boost your grades. Okay, so this system, I think, is also a very important system, because within this system, our cardiovascular system, this is where a lot of the disease happens in the human body. So across the United States, the number one killer is heart disease and heart attacks. And then blood disorders is also kind of up there as well. So I think this system is one that's important to at least have a little bit of a background in as you get into your adult life. So you're going to see me, I'm going to skip through some of the finer details. That way I'm making sure that I get to the most important stuff. Okay, given that we only have a couple weeks of school left. Alright, let's go ahead and start this. So with our cardiovascular system, obviously by looking at this picture you can tell that we are going to be focusing mainly on the heart. And with that heart will also be including the blood that pumps within this heart. We're also going to talk about some of the respiratory system with this, but we'll go ahead and just jump right in. So with your heart, okay, I always like to do a little introduction. So your heart actually pumps about 7,000 liters of blood through the body each day. Now that does not mean that you have 7,000 liters of blood in your body. You only have about 1.5 gallons of blood. So think of milk jugs maybe, and think about a 1 gallon milk jug and a 1/2 gallon milk jug. That's all the blood that you have in your body. However, your blood gets recycled and recirculates, and so 7,000 liters gets basically recirculated and recycled every day. Your heart will contract about 2.5 billion times in an average lifetime. And if you take the word cardiovascular, it also kind of makes sense, because all year we've been translating Latin terms, so we might as well finish up the year doing that. So cardiovascular, cardio obviously refers to heart. Vascular refers to vessel, so it literally means heart vessel, referring to the blood vessels and the heart itself. Okay. Alright, and here is where I'm going to start skipping things. Okay. Alright, so cardiovascular system, sometimes abbreviated CV, consists of your heart and your blood vessels. Sorry, fidgeting with things as I'm lecturing. That's not good. The heart is just an organ that's used to pump blood. A lot of times with the heart, we kind of forget that it's just a muscle. Okay, the heart is just a muscle. It's a cardiac tissue we've been talking about all year. It's the same type of muscle. Not the same type, but it's a similar muscle to what you find in a bicep, okay, or in a tricep muscle. People who actually can eat heart, like animal hearts. I think the FFA Ag classes cooked up some heart, maybe early this year, maybe last year. It was recently. People say that if you cook it right, it tastes good. I can't do it. So with your heart, remember, it's just a muscular pump. Sometimes we think of, especially around Valentine's Day, when everyone's like, oh, hearts and love and blah 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 blah. Your heart actually has nothing to do with love. Okay, that feeling of love and happiness and mushy-gushy feelings is actually all coming from your brain, and the heart has pretty much nothing to do with it. Think of the heart almost as like a mechanical pump, okay? Because that's basically what it is. It is just a pump. Now, so your heart is surrounded by blood vessels. Obviously, you have blood vessels that circulate throughout your entire body, but the blood vessels around your heart are particularly large, and they work in a way that allow blood to circulate to all parts of the body, delivering oxygen to the parts that need it and taking away carbon dioxide from the cells that are putting off carbon dioxide as waste. So the main function of the CV system, cardiovascular system, is to deliver oxygen and nutrients and to remove carbon dioxide and other waste, like other metabolic waste or urea. It also helps to aid in homeostasis, that balancing act your human body does. Helps aid in homeostasis of blood temperature and blood pH, as well as the transport of hormones. Alright, so with your heart, the average adult heart is 14 centimeters by 9 centimeters. So a lot of times people think our hearts are a lot bigger than they actually are. They are about the size of your fist. So if you make a fist, that's about the size of your heart. And then if you put your other hand over top of that fist, that's going to be your heart with what we call the pericardium around it, the covering around it. Okay, so if you were to open up a chest, you would see something that looks like your fist with your hand wrapped around it, at least based on size. Location, it's actually typically more in the center than most people believe. A lot of times people, like when they do the Pledge of Allegiance, will put their hand over their heart and they'll go way off to the left-hand side of their body and almost to their shoulder. And that's not exactly true. Okay? Your heart is actually almost in the middle, okay, almost perfectly in the middle. It's just slightly to the left of the sternum, and it's really the bottom of the heart that's just slightly to the left. Okay, so if you find your sternum, that bone right there in the middle of your chest, your heart is right behind it. Okay. It is found right in the mediastinum, connecting stuff all the way back to chapter 1. Okay, so remember that mediastinum is where we have that central compartment within the chest cavity or thoracic cavity. And it helps to, or it doesn't help, it does contain the heart vessels, esophagus, trachea, which is your windpipe, and a bunch of the nerves that help the heart with its involuntary pumping. Okay. So if you were to look in somebody's chest right here, we know rib cage by now. And that heart is pretty much right in the center, just with the bottom kind of hanging off to the left-hand side of that particular person. Okay. All right, and here's where I'm going to start skipping here in a minute. Okay. So one thing that I think is important to know, when you open up a chest, whether it be human or any other mammal, you're going to see something that does not look like a heart when you look into this cavity that holds the heart. Because the heart actually has a protective layer around it. So it has this layer called the pericardium. It's a really thick, membranous, fluid-filled sac that actually helps to enclose and protect the heart. So this is used for protection because if you think, your heart's beating 2.5 billion times in your lifetime. And we know with movement comes friction. And with friction, lots of friction in the body, not good. So, because it can actually wear holes in organs. So your heart is actually built within this sac to help protect it because the fluids there's a lot of serous fluids called pericardial fluid that actually reduces the friction that your heart causes whenever it's beating. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and skip over some of the nitty-gritty pieces and parts. There are multiple parts to the pericardium, which I normally really get into. I'll leave them in the notes in case you want to read through them, because I think reading through them you'll still kind of understand what they're saying. But the main thing I want you to know, there's a pericardium. It's this sac that's around the outside of the heart. It's got fluid in there to reduce friction. Most important part. I think I'm even going to skip that. Just briefly, your heart does have 3 layers to the muscular tissue. Once again, we kind of see these prefixes we've been seeing a lot this year. The outside layer of the heart is your epicardium. The inside, the thickest part, is going to be your myocardium. and then the inside layer is the endocardium, and this is going to line the very inside chambers of that heart. Alright, now getting into some of the anatomy of the heart. This is where I think it's important to know, because if you get into heart health, and if you've heard of people having like bypass or open heart surgery or valve replacements, that's where it's really important health-wise to understand how your heart is built. I think it's also super fascinating. It's one of my favorite organs, not based on like it's the organ that's love, which it's totally not. It's the organ that I think is the most interestingly put together. Okay, so your heart is actually a double pump. The right side of your heart, okay, so remember, think your right side, is called the pulmonary pump, and the left side is the systemic pump. It gets that name because the right side of your heart is going to pump blood to your lungs, pulmonary lungs, and the left side is going to pump it to the systemic part of you, which is the body part. Okay, so arms, legs, everything else. Your heart has 4 chambers. That's kind of easy to remember coming right out of the nervous system, because your brain had 4 chambers called ventricles in there. Guess what? Your heart also has 4 chambers, and 2 of them are going to be called ventricles. Okay, so brain has 4 chambers, heart has 4 chambers. The brain, their chambers were filled with cerebrospinal fluid. The heart's chambers were going to be obviously filled with blood. Okay, now there's 2 atria and 2 ventricles. The 2 atria, there's one on the right, there's one on the left. These are the receiving chambers of the heart, and out of the 4 chambers, they are the 2 uppermost chambers. So these are found along the top part of the heart. And it's here we find blood is going to be returning back to the heart through the veins. So blood comes back to the heart through the veins. And in this area of the heart, it has the thinnest chamber walls, mainly because it's just receiving blood. It's not having to pump it very far. And I know my background's kind of in the way here. But the right atrium receives oxygen-poor blood, okay, and will pump it to the right ventricle. The left atrium receives oxygen-rich blood and pumps it to the left ventricle. So your right and left side of the heart, think of them as 2 separate entities. Okay, the right side's all of the stuff that doesn't have oxygen and needs to get oxygen. The left-hand side of your heart has all of the blood that already has oxygen and is going to be pumped into the rest of the body. Now, there are 2 ventricles as well. There's a right and a left, just as we saw on the last slide. And these are the discharging chambers. So these are going to be on the bottom portion of the heart. They also have thicker chamber walls. So when you if you cut a heart open and you look, the walls are going to be super thick. That myocardium layer is going to be super thick. And the reason why it has to be thicker is because there's going to be more force, more pressure needed to pump the blood out of the heart and all the way through the human body, unlike the atria, which are just pumping it straight down into the ventricles. So the right ventricle is still going to be the oxygen-poor stuff, right? So the blood that's lacking oxygen, it's going to receive blood from the right atrium, right above it, and pump oxygen-poor blood into the lungs. The left ventricle is going to receive oxygen-rich blood from the lungs, and then pump that oxygen-rich blood to the rest of the body. Okay, so this over here I think might make more sense. So if we look, the right chambers are on the left-hand side of the screen because you have to picture this heart as if it was in somebody's chest. Okay, so you might be looking at the chest, but their right side is on the right side of their heart is on their right side, not your right side, because you would be backwards. Oh, rights and lefts of anatomy. Okay. So you can see here, right atrium is this little chamber right here, and it's going to get oxygen-poor blood and pump it down into the right ventricle. Now, the left atrium is going to get the blood that's rich in oxygen, so it has lots of oxygen already. It's going to pump it straight down into the left ventricle, and then the left ventricle will pump it out to the rest of the body. Notice there is actually a separation here, so there's that myocardium layer right here that actually separates the two, or this septum is sometimes what it's called too. Okay, so those are the chambers. We're going to get more into like the valves and the vessels and things like that in our next video. I will talk to you guys soon. I hope you're doing well.